Greetings, fellow ampliphiles. Today's featured amp is going to be an early 1950s Tonemaster. Now, a lot of us associate the Tonemaster brand with Magnatone, but in this case I believe the amp was made by Valco and back in probably around 1953 or so. It features just a really classic circuit, the same exact circuit that was found in the very first Fender Champ, made in 1953. It was the Fender chassis number 5C1. Now what's special about it is the first tube, the preamp tube, is not a 12AX7 as we're accustomed to, but a 6SJ7, which offers a single stage of amplification, and it is a Pentode, not a duo-triode. So it gives a much warmer, more mellow, sort of vintage sound, sort of a Fender tweed sound to the amp. Okay, so let's get started. We'll take a look at the outside of the amp. Inside, we'll evaluate that circuit, and then we will put it all together and see how it sounds. Okay, stay tuned. Okay, let's follow our normal procedure and take a look at the outside first. This is a tiny little case. I'll put my hand up here to give you an idea of size reference, but don't be fooled. This thing has more volume and more tone than amps twice its size. Okay, it's a very simple, sort of almost like a TV front. It's got the Tonemaster simple little gold plaque on it. It's front loaded. There's going to be 4 screws here that will open up, and the speaker comes with it. Back here we have you can see the finger joints coming through the Tolex, black Tolex with the nice kind of a natural leather front. Probably, I don't know, no, it probably is the original handle because it hasn't been re-riveted, so the handle's held up admirably. It's much fatter than the ones that you normally see. Very thick. The front grille is just plain old like screen door screen or window screen that has been flocked with that black flocking material. I have to be careful when I say that. Okay, let's take a look at the rear. Well, here's the rear of the amp, a brightly painted chassis, which is completely original. As you'll see when I pull the chassis out, this paint is the way it was painted the day it was made. We got the high and low gain inputs, a headphone output jack, which was added, which I don't care for at all, and then the piggyback on-off and volume control, no tone control, and the 1 amp fuse holder. I've got the little kind of a mini lower back door here that I guess holds the cord in when you're carrying it. We got a speaker. It's about I guess about a 6.5 by 9 speaker, which is not the original speaker. It's an Audio Vox oval. It's hard to find oval speakers. I would love to find an original old Rolla, which came in this, which is actually a larger speaker. It's more like 7 by 10. I guess I'll have to start watching eBay. Gigantic power transformer, nice and big, which helps with the tone and the volume. 6SJ7, 6V6, 5Y3. Okay, that's it. You see the inside. It's just regular pine with knots. It has age to where it's kind of a dark, kind of a reddish brown color instead of the bright yellow or golden color of new pine. Okay, that's it. Simple as can be. Let's take a look at some schematics, and then we'll be ready to look at the chassis itself. Okay, before we look at the Tonemaster schematic, let's take a look at the gold standard of all 3-tube amplifiers, and that's the Fender Champ from 1953, the model 5C1. This is the tweed Champ. That's worth a fortune, and people use for recording purposes. A wonderful amp. Okay, I'm going to draw your attention to certain aspects of this schematic that will be important to compare with the Tonemaster. Input impedance, they're both the same at 75K. Coupling capacitor between the 6SJ7 and the 6V6 is 0.02 microfarads. The bypass capacitor for the 6V6 is 25 microfarads. There are 3 8 microfarad filter capacitors down here with a 500 ohm resistor between the first 2. Okay, keep those in mind, those features, and then let's look at the Tonemaster schematic. Okay, here's the schematic for the Tonemaster, and since I'm not positive who made this amp, I couldn't find the right schematic. It's been modified, so we're better off, in this case, of just drawing one. So this is drawn right from the chassis of the Tonemaster, and I did it in the Champ style of schematic drawing so that they could have a nice side-by-side comparison. I've circled all the things where the Tonemaster is completely different than the Champ. Here, input impedance seems very high to me. It should be closer to 68K. This amp may have been modified for harmonica use. If that's the case, then since I'm going to use it for guitar, I'm going to put this back to more like 68 or 75K. Second thing, a 0.1 microfarad coupling capacitor may not be a big issue, but the Champ uses a 0.02. I'll probably do a comparison. I'll play a couple chords through the amp with this and then with a 0.02 and see which I like better. The volume control pot, rather low impedance on the Tonemaster, 275, probably a 250K pot. Whereas the Champ and most other amps like this, it's 1 meg. This might limit how high the volume can be turned up. Okay, I don't know, I don't have any of these on hand, so I might just leave it. We'll see how that works out. The thing that really bothers me though is down here, there is a whole missing section in the filtration portion of the power supply, and that is normally there's a 500 ohm resistor right here and another 10 microfarad capacitor. That's just missing. And I don't think this is adequate filtration. Although the amp doesn't hum, I think this I need to put it back to where most amps are, which is 500 ohms here and 10 microfarads there. And then I look at the cathode biasing and bypassing. I don't know if that's a correct value. I'm going to have to check to see what the plate dissipation is on the 6V6 and pick an appropriate resistor. I'm probably going to change this from 10 microfarad to 25 microfarads at 50 volts. Since this is a 450 volt capacitor, I may use it down here. Okay, so that's the plan so far. I hope it makes sense. Let's see how it turns out. Well, here's the top of the chassis after it's been removed from the cabinet, and it's a kind of a clever suspension method. The edges here of the steel, and this is a good heavy steel chassis, slide in these grooves in the cabinet, and then the chassis is held in tight by 2 screws that sort of lock the drawer in place. Okay, it's painted white, obviously that's the way it came because this is the original lettering for the tubes. 6SJ7 preamp tube, it's a Pentode. It's just a single stage, not like the 12AX7 or the 6SL7. It's just a single stage of amplification, but believe me, when you hear this, that's plenty. Okay, we got the 6V6 GT. It's specifying a glass tube and a 5Y3 GT, which makes me think that this amp is probably from the 50s instead of the 40s, partly because of the cabinet design and partly because they're specifying glass tubes rather than metal body tubes. Okay, there's the new filter capacitor can that's been added, a big, heavy, really high quality power transformer, and a 3-wire plug that was already installed when I got the amp. Okay, so as you can see, quite simple. Well, here's the underside of the chassis, and as you can see, it's painted white just like the rest of it. Mark 76D. I'm not sure what that refers to. Here's a pretty good size output transformer, the new can filter capacitors, the rectifier tube here, the 5Y3 with its 5 volt and high voltage leads coming from the power transformer, fuse holder, the piggyback on-off switch with the potentiometer up here for volume. These are the two original input jacks which communicate with the 6J7 preamp tube. This has been added, and it is an earphone output jack. And it comes over here. There, as you can see, the impedance has been added to the line because anytime if you want to have an earphone output jack, you have to add a great deal of impedance to that circuit so that it's not overpowered by the output transformer. Okay, all in all, really neat and clean. A couple new capacitors have been added. This one had been worked on before I got it. It looks like some pretty decent work, and it certainly does play well, and it has excellent volume and tone, so I can't argue with the work that was done on it. I probably would not have drilled a hole and put in a earphone output jack on the chassis, but you know, once it's done, it's hard to undo it. So there it is. Let's put it all together and see how it sounds. Okay, here's a baseline sound check with the amp turned on. The volume is straight up in a 5 position. It's plugged into the workshop speaker, not the oval speaker in the cabinet. Sounds wonderful. Really good volume and tone. Okay, now I'll do a sound check with the original oval speaker plugged in to the amp. It's going to be in the straight up volume position, just like with the workshop speaker, but bear in mind this speaker is much closer. It's probably 2 feet away, whereas the workshop speaker is probably 8 or 9 feet away. Well, I can tell you right off, there's no comparison in tone or volume. The volume is way low with this speaker, and the tone is real mushy, no clarity, no treble, not much bass. Very disappointed. Okay, I'm going to take a good look at this speaker. Well, it looks a little like history is repeating itself if you watch the airline videos. I took out the oval speaker, and it's got a piece of black cloth glued over the face of it. I'm sure that seemed like a wonderful idea probably at the factory because it's done so well, but that's got to be muffling high frequency. That can't be good. I'm going to remove this and we'll see how it sounds without it. Well, here's the speaker without that cloth covering. I cut it away, and you notice that the suspension is heavily doped. It's like a double or triple dose, which makes the speaker very, very stiff, the cone. And that's going to cut way down on the efficiency of the speaker and will also lower the volume. It may well muffle the high frequency, we'll see. But anyway, I have a feeling it will sound better now, but how much better I'm not sure. It's kind of interesting. You can see from the outline that the original speaker was much larger. It was probably 7 by 10. Whereas the replacement speaker is 6.5 by 9 1/4. So the original speaker completely filled all the space in the cabinet. I guess I may have to hunt one of these down. Okay, here's the finished product. We're ready to button it up. The speaker has had that piece of cloth removed that was covering the cone and kind of stifling the treble response. The input impedance has been changed from 100 and 150 to 75 and 100. I left the 0.1 microfarad alone. It didn't seem to make much difference. I added a 25 microfarad bypass capacitor to the cathode of the 6V6, which improved both the volume and the bass response. In the power supply, I added a 470 ohm resistor and an extra 10 microfarad filter capacitor. Here's the schematic. You see the 470 has been added here with the extra 10. The 25 microfarad bypass capacitor. The 330 is really a 360. I checked the bias and it was biased way too hot, it was at 10.42 watts. But with the added 470 ohm resistor and the added 10 microfarad capacitor, it dropped it down so that the final tube plate dissipation was 9.4 watts, which I can live with. It's a little high, but the thing, it really sounds good, and it doesn't seem to be heating up excessively. Okay, so let's put it back together and see what we think. Okay, here we are for the final sound check. Everything's been changed that's going to be changed. The volume is straight up at the 5 position. Let's see what it sounds like. Wow, it seems crystal clear. I don't hear any of the muffled sound from the speaker like we had before. Good bass response. It feels real warm. It's not the kind of solid state sound that you get sometimes with a 12AX7. I really think it's turned out great. Well, that about does it for today's video featuring the early 1950s Tonemaster amp. I think you'll have to agree it packs a whole lot of volume and tone in a very small package. I hope you enjoyed what you saw, that you'll consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and that you'll join me in the future for similar videos featuring classic vintage amplifiers and gear. Thanks so much for your time and interest. I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.